us.
All right, it says we're going live soon. It has a little bar that's moving up. You are live now, it says. And this will be recorded as well. So people, we can recommend to them that they tune back in if they miss out somehow.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Tyler. You ready for us to get started?
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. We'll be using our chat and our Q&A functions. I'm the moderator. If you have any questions, just hook them right in the chat box. We'll try and navigate them on the fly. This is all of our first time using this Excel events platform. So we will figure this out as we roll, and then I'll just hand it right over to Erica.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tyler. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Welcome to the session where we're going to talk a little bit about our work and what we do to build more equity and inclusion in participatory policy making and research. So my name's Erica King, and I'm a Senior Justice Policy Associate at the University of Southern Maine. And I want to introduce my incredible co-panelists, maybe starting with Morgan, and then we can end with Ali.
Great. I'm Morgan Hind. I'm the director of the Bingham Program, a small health philanthropy that is based in Maine. And I'll pass it to Jillian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jillian Foley. I'm a policy associate at the Keller Institute at the University of Southern Maine. And let's go to Brianna.
Not Ali.
Not Ali.
Right, and I cannot figure out how to change it. So sorry, Ali. There's two of you today. I might be prettier though. So my name's Brianna Doobie. I'm formerly incarcerated from the Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center, where I started working with Erica. Currently pursuing an associate's degree in justice studies, and really looking forward to moving into some policy work. And I'm also a student research assistant with the University of Southern Maine, working with one of Erica's colleagues. So I'm excited to be here and to share some information and inspiration to everybody. And I will pass it over to Erica.
Thank you, Bree. Before we toss to Ali, I'm wondering, Erin Sinelli is our co-presenter and fearless co-panelist here, and she's listed in our list of attendees, but we're trying to figure out the technology so we can promote her over here to panelist so she can speak. But I just want to honor Erin and her role in shaping this presentation and really in shaping this work.
Erica, just want to mention that she's from the Rocking Moon Foundation.
Yes. So she's here today representing this work in her capacity of the Rocking Moon Foundation. And love to pass it over to Ali. I don't know what I would do if there were really two of you, but but my partner in justice in so much of this work, to just get us sort of grounded in the topic for today.
Hey guys, my name is Ali, he, him, his. Introduction. I am also previously incarcerated in a juvenile facility here in Maine, and right now I actually work as an advocacy director for the campaign to close down the juvenile facility that helped me in. I also work with the University of Southern Maine as a policy analyst, and with Opportunity Scholars, we started an organization that gets youth that are previously incarcerated into higher education, partnership with YPC, which is Young People's Caucus, an organization that connects to legislators to influence policy. And I was recently on the Race and Equity Committee for the City of Portland, also a full-time student. I'm very happy to be here today. I got something for you guys. It's a poem to kind of settle ourselves and really just kind of touch base on why we're doing this work in the first place. What does carceral state mean? How does it feel inside the body? How does it affect people of color? And how does it relate to this time, right? So it's called Carceral Humanism. If y'all are ready, without further ado. As I'm sitting here quarantined, I use it to my advantage. Confused times, but there has been no damage. A relieved sigh from a wounded bandage. I feel so calm, like it's easy to manage, but many will differ because they can't really stand it. If you're wondering why I'm so subtle during these casualties, it's because I'm used to calamities. It's part of my sanity. Let me picture you my fantasy. This is a painting of my reality. I contemplate and I concentrate. You tend to do that when there's a lot at stake. Coming from emptiness and a soul to hate, I couldn't be that lucky number 7 while in Section 8. We were in a trap cage by fences. Well, that's how most hoods are if you see through clear lenses, surrounded by outside barriers as if it's a watchtower. While community police had that soul power to protect and serve is their slogan, but the false advertisements will leave you broken. False promise that said in calmness does not become honest. Painting me a picture with fake polish as we work so hard with no profit. Only thing rising is your pockets, so stop it. We were raised in an asylum, in tight spaces, non-private, in a building that had high mileage. Expected you raise your child in, as we accepted blinded, because if we speak out, we're wild, and so we tend to keep silent. My life has been stricken by so-called policy. Poverty had become the essence of my democracy. While options and opportunity depend on your community, my pathways were bleak with no sense of priority. But somewhere a pipeline is mentioned from school to prison, as if it was a norm from a detention to a detention. Sadness and grief surrounded my gaze, with a shelter at home but no parents some days, siblings to foster I never asked to raise, while I sacrificed my hunger so they could be safe. I feel weak in class, I can't stay focused for long, my mind worries in fragments, it's a replayed song. I may have ADHD, is this how it feels? What the hell are we discussing? These people are weird. How can they sit here and focus? It's just not interesting. I have shit to deal with, man. Please wrap up this lesson. Some days we will talk about slavery or Vietnam or Japan or how terrible Hitler was to set up his plan while pointing out all the world's mistakes. We're the heroes here with some similar traits. And then it hit me after a second. Isn't it crazy how a complexion can choose the direction that you choose to step in? A mere vision of tint can change your mindset or the cognitive thinking, I guess. Hypnotized to not realize that we're a mess, taught how to hate in a society that we do not address, because race is a topic that's so complex. But how do you ignore something that's so surprising? Maybe it's because you're not the one that's being oppressed. Yet. See, I seem different. A vision where lineage is stuck in a systematic prison and brainwashed into their predicament. Well, one can't control, one can't be held accountable. So how do we choose to live like you? Change from black to blue or a few shades lighter too? My mindset were all the resources that were given to me. And at that age, nobody would listen to me. So I concentrate. Failure is what society illustrates as my fate. It's not about the choices we make. It's what's given on my plate. While constantly being watched with no options to evolve, I see the chaos all around me. So I paused. I had thoughts that making it out must be the best escape, but an invisible chain is instilled in my fate. Man, carceral humanism is upstate. But with wealth and plans, I must fluctuate, lead a positive trait to find a way out this empty space. My results of anger, as they ridiculed, transforms into energy, physical, not the arrogant results of a mule, but the motive to build a stepping stool, to return and give back what we once lacked, educate and separate from what distracts at a common goal as our mind attracts, because only wolves are strongest while in a pack. So I'm setting this movement of working together to better our circumstances here and forever. Well, not just for us, for our families too, loving brothers and sisters that look like you. I'm exhausted and tired of seeing those weary eyes that glistening in the light fades like that mother's smile as she has to bury her seed of pain to see her cry. And she asks God why she's fragile inside. And here we are in this mortified human life with corruption some are blinded by. Inequity has taken the power slide, but reality just hit for the normal mind. While we're in this predicament, let's remember to be appreciative. Lots of things we have taken for granted, like the structure and opportunity that you are handed, isn't the same for every child that has once been stranded. While the public eye has been blinded and vanished, everyone was careless before COVID's transit. But now that we're all on the same planet, I hope you see it and finally understand it. It's quarantine.
Amazing. Amazing. I wish the audience could applaud. Incredible. Oh, yay. And here's Aaron. thank you, Ali, for just setting off the tone of this, and invite those of you listening in the chat before we move on to just think about that term, carceral humanism, and how and if it shows up in your work. This idea to push or to exclude or other folks that are even within your populations. So, yay, now that we have Morgan and Erin, I'd love to turn it over to you and then just give you a flow for the session. Anybody welcome to, thank you for those of you chiming in the chat, and we'd love to make this a participatory session. So throughout, each of us will maybe raise some questions for you to think about, and we'd love for you to engage with us in the chat. And so we're going to start with Morgan and Erin talking a little bit about funding, and then we'll move through the presentation together and reserve some time at the end for Q&A with all of you. So I'll pass it to Morgan and Erin. Thank you.
Erin, take it away.
Okay, thanks everyone. My name is Erin Chinelli, and I'm here with the Rocking Moon Foundation, and just wanted to give a little bit of background about our work with Erica and her team at the Cutler Institute. The Rocking Moon Foundation has a focus area in youth justice reform and funds both nationally and here in Maine. And when we started in this issue area, I talked to a lot of different people and was able to connect with Erica and to understand a little bit more about what was happening in Maine, in particular with efforts to close Long Creek, but also provide an alternative for all those questions that start happening when you ask the question of what happens when you close Long Creek, then what? And so the foundation has provided a couple of different rounds of funding, primarily for the Place Matters project, to really help, as I said, provide the answers to that question, and to really make the case for a community-based continuum of care as an alternative to secure detention facilities in Maine. So our process at the Rocky Moon Foundation is pretty relationship focused, and we really value the relationships that we have with our grantees, and keep the grantee funder relationship kind of an open conversation that's always ongoing, and it allows for lots of flexibility. So I think that's all I'll share now, and I'll turn it to Morgan, and look forward to hearing from everyone. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Erin. And I just want to point out to the attendees that Erica is placing some links in the chat, so please check those out. And so I'll follow up with Erin by talking about how the Bingham program came to our partnership with the Cutler Institute. And I'll start by saying the Bingham program is a small health philanthropy, and for many years, we've been focused on adverse childhood experiences and building awareness of ACEs, and also now a little bit more focused on the impact of positive childhood experiences to mitigate the impact of ACEs. And we know that having an incarcerated parent is one of the top adverse childhood experiences that a child can have. And we also know that kids who have an incarcerated parent have 1.4 more ACEs than kids who have not had an incarcerated parent. So those kids end up with an array of adverse childhood experiences. And those kids also end up being at significant risk for being incarcerated themselves later in life. They have those children end up with poorer long-term health outcomes. And in particular, children of incarcerated mothers have higher rates of incarceration than children with incarcerated fathers. So when the Bingham program was introduced to the work that you're going to be hearing more about, we were really connecting to it through adverse childhood experiences and the importance of maternal bonding with their children. And, as I met Erica and the folks at Cutler and Jillian and others, it became this great relationship where, we could center the voices of mothers who happen to be incarcerated and really use their experience to inform and do the research needed to come up with solutions to the issues that are created by incarceration. And so, Erica, I'm sure, I don't know if you have access to that link, but I can link to it in just a second. But their work resulted in a great paper called Breaking the Cycle, Interrupting Generational Incarceration. And you'll hear more about that. But it just is so clear how important this work is, considering how many more women are becoming incarcerated, not just in the nation, but right here in the state of Maine, and the impact that's having on all of our kids in this state. It's pretty huge. So I'll pause there. I feel like I could talk a long time about this, but I also want to say that Erin and I are going to keep an eye on the chat box. And throughout this presentation, there are going to be some questions we pose that are a little bit rhetorical, but if you want to share your thoughts about the questions or anything, any questions that come up in the chat, Erin and I are going to monitor that, and we'll address them throughout. So please feel free to throw in your comments and questions right in the chat. And with that, I'll hand it to either Jillian or Erica. Sorry.
Am I muted? I'm happy to go next. So just to get us started, we'd love to hear, thank you so much, Erin and Morgan, for that and for your investments in this work. As a public researcher / policy associate, or I think of myself as a pracademic, I have asked myself a lot in these conversations about equity, what is it really going to take for the people whose outcomes and the most vulnerable Mainers among us to be able to thrive in communities in Maine? And so that's the point, that's the end in mind by which I center my work, and really focus on results-oriented research and policy development. What are the solutions, and how can I make a commitment to make my work give up some power and make my work more participatory? So all of my methods and nothing that I do, I really truly believe as a social worker, nothing about them without them. So increasingly building, partnerships with Ali and Bree are too, but with folks who are directly impacted across systems, and making sure that we're using the most reliable data and those voices to inform these conversations about what the strategies in Maine could be so that we can make a measurable difference in some of our most vulnerable. So next slide, Jillian, we'll walk you through, and I put in the chat two of the reports, one that has been funded primarily by Rocking Moon, the last one that I just put in, but we're going to talk about it first, and another that Morgan referenced that was funded by the Bingham program. And so I'm going to invite Ali, and I will talk a little bit about the youth work, and then Jillian and Bree will talk about the work that we've done with mothers and to try to build resources for children in Maine impacted by parental incarceration. So both Erin and Morgan referenced the Place Matters project, and some of you might be wondering, what is that? And it's sort of my attempt to put the result in the center, not the building in the center, not a system's needs, and no offense, but not even a funder's needs, but what would it take if we were, growing and we were really participatory and thought beyond a 12-month funding cycle of what it would be like to turn the curve on Maine on some of these outcomes. Ali referenced in carceral humanism that we have pipelines, right? And there's lots and lots written on pipelines to the justice system and pipelines to poor youth outcomes. And so we wanted to look at, could we build the data resources to see how those factors might be playing out in Maine and have some integrity and accountability to who's better off and who isn't? Can we work with our partners and systems to inspire innovation and systemic change? And can we partner with youth in directly impacted communities, as well as many communities as possible across Maine, to activate and stimulate those assets? Maine is a big, small town in so many ways, and we have so much to learn from and cross-pollinate across our counties and really to scale up to make a measurable difference in the opportunity landscape for young people and for directly impacted folks here. So next slide, Jillian. And so all of you listening, one thing that informs my work, and I can put a link to this sort of briefing note in here, but is a framework that I offer to you as person role system, that each of us, this work of making sure that we're getting population outcomes for some of our most directly impacted populations who do not see equity in this state, that none of us gets to opt out, right? So we are all people, and how we bring that shapes our roles, and we have different roles to play in systems. But how we work together as a network beyond this conference, both in our formal and informal roles, really influences and matters to the outcomes of young people in those places, about the work that does get funded, about the work that doesn't get funded. 7% of national philanthropy funding goes to women's justice, for example. And so that was a really hard project that I don't think I would have been able to move without Morgan, and it's leading to some really transformational things. So I really encourage you listening to think about, what's the role you play in the system, and how we can partner together to build better, more robust strategies, because I see this as the work of partnerships. So we really do take a results-focused approach in Place Matters, and the population result we're working for is that we want all young people, families, and communities impacted by the justice system to experience safety and well-being in their communities. And I want to lift up for today 3 sort of equity strategy populations that I'm going to suggest that data and research in Maine have suggested to us over and over and over again that we need more targeted and deepened investments in to get to equitable outcomes. And one is our older youth, our system-involved transition-aged youth, 14 to 24, all transition-aged youth. I'll put in the chat another resource that just came to my attention recently, that about 9.6% of our young people in Maine in this age group are disconnected from work or career, right? And we don't know how they're doing. We don't know, but that rate of disconnection is something that we can change together by building better pathways into adulthood. And lifting up what Morgan foreshadowed about children impacted by incarceration. It's not just the transition-aged youth. We have a criminal justice system, a county jail system. The report that we did is just the beginning of trying to understand how many young people are impacted by this in our state. One of the most powerful, lasting, lifelong outcomes is having a parent member or family member impacted by incarceration. And we've categorically been ignoring that in the state. So can we do more there? And then within all of these populations, follow the same vulnerabilities that we see on BIPOC, LGBTQA, women and girls, and poor rural places, follow them right into the justice system. And those disparities widen, whatever we see in other systems. So that's really the focus of our approach. And of course, that means aligning our contribution with many other systems. So next question for you all, and let's see if we can get the chat lit up a little bit, is, how do we create more paid opportunities for directly impacted populations to share their expertise and participate in generating policy solutions? Would love to hear if you have ideas or thoughts about how we can do that together in Maine. How do we create more of I think of pipelines and pathways, pipelines into deeper system. How can we create more pathways out, directly paid opportunities for people to use their expertise to help transform these systems and communities? So I'll just pause there for a second. And then Ali, I'm going to invite you to jump in if you want to talk a little bit about our work. And one way that I've started doing that is working with Ali and other folks who have justice histories to build sort of these opportunity pathways, to build in paid opportunities for them to work with me on research and policy projects, to develop their own policy projects, to provide support to post-secondary education pursuit. If that's not what someone wants, what can we do to connect to educational, but meeting people where they are and helping them come up with their next step. So this is a little bit about what we're doing to build opportunity pathways. And I'll pause here. Yeah, that's okay, Jillian, to go to the next one. and invite Ali to jump in, talk a little bit about where we started with Opportunity Scholars as one way to, as people focus on closing youth prisons, how do we open higher education and employment opportunities?
Well, I mean, it's exactly that, what you just said. Really closing down youth prisons, and all the money that's going into that, and how to find different outlets and different pathways for youth that could get into higher education and school. So with Opportunity Scholars, which is a small initiative right now that's connected to the University of Southern Maine School of Policy. What we have is we have youth that are previously incarcerated, and we want to get them in through the doors of the university. For example, when I first applied to the University of Southern Maine, the difficulty even getting in and getting accepted, it nearly took me 2 years to fully get accepted. And now, I mean, I have a 3.7 GPA, which is and it's just to prove the point that education itself can is a way of not only therapeutic relief, but a future. See somebody pursue whatever they want to pursue as a future. And on top of Opportunity Scholars, we have all these other partner organizations right now that we're trying to create, and it's called within a network. So one of the organizations is Maine Youth Justice, which is the campaign, Maine Inside Out, which is a therapeutic theater group. There's Young People's Caucus, which is the connecting youth to legislators and people that are empowered to influence policy. And then we have that higher education. And every single one of them, we have this stipending program where we stipend youth to participate in any of this. What we're trying to do is create this continuum of care outside of the juvenile justice system, because for example, incarcerating a person in juvenile in Maine, it costs $300,000 a year, and these programs cost a lot less than that. So having this does not only does it build opportunity, but also builds a huge continuum throughout the state of Maine. It's not only in Southern Maine or whatever. And by proving this point, and by hoping to do this, is we're hoping that we're working with the state government right now to look at this as a future, because we messed up back in the 90s and the early 2000s with incarceration, expecting that that criminalization and punishment was a way of treating people, when it's actually not. It's actually because the reason why they're doing that is because that's what they're accustomed to. And that giving other people different opportunities will give better pathways and better outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Anyone want to guess what the recidivism rate is for someone with a justice history that has a master's degree? Any guesses in the chat? It's 0%. Huh? What are you guessing, Bree?
I was gonna say, zip, zilch, nada.
Yeah, 0%, according to some studies. It's a huge pathway. So folks talk about, the school to prison pipeline, and there's debates about whether that does or does not exist. But we know that school quality, high school graduation rates, things like expulsion, disabilities, all kinds of things create an environment of pushing that contribute to that disconnection rate that we see. And so the idea to build education and post-secondary ed as a pathway in is something we're really focused on. So one of the first, and again, this is thanks to Erin's sort of risk-taking with me, funding some more deeper analysis with young people, where we were able to do much more participatory. It's slower than the way, and it's so much more rich and meaningful, is to build young people into this work, from the design to the facilitation of focus groups, to the analysis of the data, to the findings. So one of the pieces that I put in the chat is the research that we've talked about, is we have all the factors, right, measured at the community level, and the social and economic determinants of young people, of that lead people potentially to risk in communities, into the justice system. But what we really wanted to do is some deep listening to young people that are involved in the system of care, of do those factors connect with their lived experience, right? What are the things we had them build sort of a timeline of their life from birth to now, draw it, talk about it with words, however you want to, but just reflect on your pathway into systems of care, your highlights, lowlights, things that helped you along the way, things that really challenged. And you almost unilaterally across young people and across communities of Maine, these 6 themes kept coming up. And so we're really trying to center the voices of young people who are telling us poverty, healthcare access, and access to services and supports, separation from family, like through incarceration, through child welfare involvement, through family homelessness, and push out and practices in school systems. And then importantly, and right on the theme of this conference, discrimination and othering. Sometimes, and I'm using those terms, we could call it racism, sexism, and other things. I'm using that term because we had a lot of LGBT young people in the study who really talked about how they felt not part of, like they didn't matter, that they were discriminated against in their school and home communities. And that really sort of led them to systems of care and system involvement and influenced their well-being. So next slide, Jillian, if we could. Coming. Next slide. Here's a picture, by the way, of one of the journey maps. If you click onto the report of young people, just again, more powerful for those of you that are not readers among us. We hope, we hope that you can click through this, and the words, the pictures depict it more powerfully than we could ever say. But I want to lift up a new mom who's not able to join us on this panel, but Sophie McMullen, who is a co-author and sort of is in her 3rd year of Opportunity Scholars with us, and really has been stayed by this report. And she, asked her to give a quote to you, and she said these young people that she's met for the research also already have more life experience than a lot of adults, and they too easily fall through the cracks. It's up to us to hear their experience and shine light on the issues they raised. So this report is certainly one attempt for us to do that and center them in data and policy making in a qualitative way. They're all often represented numerically. Next slide, Jillian. So before we switch over to talking to the work with Bingham and with Bree and Jillian, we'd just love to hear from you a little bit in the chat, if you'd like to, is what does it look like to support children and families who are directly impacted by the justice system? And that could mean for you, based on your role prior to as a prevention strategy, it could mean during a period of incarceration, or it could mean after on release and reentry and community reintegration, which we know is woefully under-resourced. So just pause for a minute to see if there's anything in the chat that raises up for you as Jillian and Bree lead us through the next section.
Erica, I just want to take a minute to note what people have said so far. And Nanette Dyer Blake was talking about how we need to make sure justice-involved people are included in all conversations at all levels where policy decisions are happening. We also heard from Elizabeth Pope talking about how we need to make sure that young people feel supported and are being reached in ways that feel comfortable and accessible to them, rather than expecting them to conform to the opportunities that already exist. So I think
totally makes sense.
Yeah, great point. Amber Kruk said, we need to eliminate barriers for paid participation. We need to legislate and advocate for change. For example, licensing and Maine care reimbursement through the state of Maine, and sometimes federally limits our ability to hire individuals who have criminal records, not all but some, or DHHS involvement at their agencies. So that makes it really hard for them to invite those individuals to the table in meaningful ways. So there are some really concrete policy issues that we could tackle head on. So I just wanted to lift up those comments so far, and please, everybody, put your thoughts in the chat. These are great.
Thank you so much for Morgan slowing us down and looking at that. And it makes total sense. Lizzie Pope, good to see you there. And I think that's a key of Opportunity Scholars is like my work, and you'll hear from Bree and Ali at the end about my work is not just having them fit into like these opportunities, but really listening to them about like, what's the next opportunity? What can we help you create in the world? What is it that you want to do? And how can I help fundraise so that you're able to have a platform to do it? And then one more thing about Amber's point that I wanted to lift up as a small victory this year is that we were able to influence a change in across the UMaine system to ban the box on admissions records. So folks with justice histories, and this hasn't been widely broadcasted, but I want to share it here. that no longer will anyone with a justice history be asked to check that box at admission to a University of Maine campus across the state. And we are working with a group across the UMaine system now called the JEDI, the Justice Education Development Implementation Team, to develop student supports for this population. So thank you for all of your great comments. And is there some more there, Morgan? Sorry. Let's see. Oh, yay.
Yeah.
Thank you for the claps.
Yeah, lots of cheering in the chat box, but no.
Right. We have to do it for employment and for other sectors, but or at least figure out ways. But it's a huge win for the UMaine system, and and Ali and Bree are both talented students in there too, of so many that have justice histories. So it's one part to not exclude them from admissions. It's another thing to cultivate a campus of belonging. So that's the work ahead. Yes, beautiful. And at public schools, I mean, really the key to so much. Yeah. Beautiful.
Oh, and sharing your story, sharing your personal stories, engaging youth with opportunities to write and share, providing support for secondary education application essays. Yeah, these are all great.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Okay, so Jillian and Bree, would you like to lead us through a little bit of the work on generational incarceration and our work with moms?
Yes, thank you, Erica. And Bree, I'm going to go through this. Feel free to jump in as needed. So as was alluded to, one of our strategy populations that the Place Matters team focuses on is children who have been impacted by parental incarceration, particularly in Maine. And the latest nationwide estimates suggest that more than 5 million children nationwide have experienced incarceration of a parent at some point in their life. And so the Place Matters team, in partnership with the Bingham program, thanks to Morgan, really wanted to explore this issue further in Maine. And, as Morgan talked about, the reason as to sort of why really has to do with the trauma that's experienced and the fact that parental incarceration is one of the CDC's adverse childhood experiences. And not only is it an adverse childhood experience, it's one that is we say is actually the result of a policy or a system decision making process. So, and then also in addition to that, we, as Morgan started to talk about, parental incarceration is a traumatic experience that not only leads to an increased risk of poor outcomes long-term in regards to mental health, behavioral problems, family instability, juvenile justice system involvement. It's also an issue that disproportionately affects Black children in particular, children living in poverty. So in our state, those are a lot of the rural communities. And Black children in particular are actually twice as likely to have experienced parental incarceration compared to white children. So this is an equity issue, so it's really pertinent to this conference and this discussion. And so we developed this project, which had multiple strategies to sort of examine the issue of parental incarceration in Maine. One of them was the research brief that Erica and Morgan both mentioned, which I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute. But one of the other strategies that Bree was involved in was the course that was created in development with the University of Maine and the Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center with the Maine Department of Corrections. Bree, do you want to say anything about the course?
Yeah, so the course was actually called Incarceration in Society. And so it was actually my first semester enrolling in school. And I literally signed up, and the same day the educational woman, Abby Turner, she came to me and she said, I think this class would be great for you. And at the time I was actually studying for a business degree. and hated every moment of it. And so when she came to me with this, given my background, I was like, I absolutely want to be involved, having children myself and my children being part of the numbers in these statistics. It's something so important to me. So I jumped on the opportunity, and that's kind of how all of this started. I had the choice to end the class and move on with my life, but it was something that touched me deeply, that affected not just me, but every woman that surrounded me at the time. And it gave me like this pedestal to stand on and be able to be a voice for this like hidden population that just, people absolutely have no idea of the staggering numbers of these children. So that's where it all started, was this wonderful course. We got a little sidetracked, and we did a lot of COVID research in the midst of doing the rest of it. I actually was co-author on an op-ed about COVID and incarceration, but the effects on children are really where my heart lies. And so this class kind of it changed my life. It changed my direction. I'm now a justice studies student. And so I will forever be grateful for that opportunity, because without that, I wouldn't be here talking to you guys. And, this is an honor from where I was released from less than 6 months ago to being here in this conference right now. And just the invitation alone is absolutely the kind of thing that more women need the opportunity to do, so that they know their self-worth and they're able to maintain a regular life in society with their family and the people that matter. So I know you have some more stuff to go over, Jillian, and I'll go over some more of my own information after, but that way you can get through the presentation.
Me too. Yeah, no, that was great. So as Bree mentioned, the course also led to some further opportunities for some of the women that were involved. So not just the course, but it led to independent study, it led to internships and other opportunities for a lot of the women. So this project continues, and the original goal was to really provide a foundation for policymakers and stakeholders in Maine as we develop strategies to stop parental incarceration in Maine. As we move forward, we have a lot of ideas and goals that we'd like to move on with. Really just continuing the research and trying to develop our data strategy. And Bree can also talk a little bit later about some of the research that she's been designing in order to continue some of that work. And then also just bringing awareness, doing discussions and events like this to sort of get people talking about this issue and really lift up the children and make people aware of this in Maine. One of the strategies that we are working on expanding and developing is very similar to what Ali and Erica talked about with the Opportunity Scholars strategy, and that's the Justice Scholars. So the Opportunity Scholars is really focused on the transition-aged youth. This particular strategy is focused on building opportunities for post-secondary education, higher education for adults. At the moment, it's particularly women who are enrolled in the University of Maine, Augusta, Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center college program. But the key here is really to provide those paid positions, the paid opportunities for the women who are students to participate in policy and research work, and really do the participatory work with us.
And can I jump in, Jillian, to say just right here?
Yeah.
Another exciting thing is that UMA just received a $1 million grant from the Mellon Foundation to hire a director of prison education, and we have a role in that with opportunity and expansion of justice scholars. So we've been meeting, we're just starting to meet every Wednesday at noon to have a roundtable, and it's been amazing because we've had Bree, we've had people that are inside at the Maine State Prison, a person who's in, a maximum security prison able to participate with us on Zoom every Wednesday and start to co-design what this might look like to be more of a network together. So exciting things ahead.
Yeah, and just to kind of build off that as well, Erica, I'm assuming that you would know because I got a flying recommendation from you, but I did just also receive an invitation to be part of the prison education partnership at the University of Maine at Augusta too. So that is just amazing work being done. And it just goes to show that everything that we have pushed so hard for in the last 2 years, really, it's moving. It's moving. Like people are finally listening, and for that, and the people who are attending right now, like, thank you. Please spread the word that these issues are important and they need some light.
Thank you. So as we mentioned, one of the items that came out of this project was some quantitative research, which resulted in a policy brief. Erica put the link to that in the chat, so you can check that out later. But the goal of this was really to take what was really a first look at the data in Maine and try to understand the scope of the issue in Maine. We wanted to really understand how many children are affected by this. And so we analyzed a data set in partnership with the Maine Department of Corrections and examined records of parents over a 5-year period. We found some really interesting results. In total, there were 3,403 children who were part of that data set who had been impacted by parental incarceration over that 5-year period. One of the things about this is that we know, this was, again, really just a first look, a snapshot, and we know that in terms of the true scale of this issue, that's a really big undercount. This data it only included parents who were incarcerated at a state facility, so it didn't include people who were at county jails. It didn't include anyone who might have been at a federal facility or a parent who might have been incarcerated somewhere out of state. And it also didn't include juvenile parents who might have been incarcerated at a juvenile facility. So in order to really understand the true scope of this issue, we definitely have some more research and data analysis that needs to be done. But we now can say that we know that at least 3,000 children have been impacted by this in Maine. So like I said, Brianna in particular has designed some qualitative research to sort of get a little bit more at the heart of the issue and the impacts of this. This one was really focused on just the data and sort of answering the who, she can speak a little bit more about that. I don't know if you want to do it now or later.
I totally can. So part of, the class through UMA was working with a wonderful professor, Catherine Darling, who is just an amazing, she's a sociologist, correct? She has this brain that functions at just a different level than I've ever seen. And so she brings so much just outside the box ideas. And so working with her was so great because it gave me just this opportunity to really reach out and say, let's look at, we know there's ACEs involved. We know that there's pipelines into the system. But what we don't know are the personalized stories that are really going to bring the attention that we want to the issue. For me, I'm a visual person. If I was sitting here reading these slides, I would be falling asleep. So no offense, Jillian, I love your slides. You do a great job. I just don't want to read them. I want to hear somebody tell me their story and why it's important to them. And so that is why the research I want to do is so important to me, because it would literally give voice to the women who right now literally are just in quarantine on top of quarantine and have, friends and family in the world that they're just disconnected from, and they have stories to tell. So the research I want to do would be anonymous interviews, unless somebody wants their information shared publicly. That would be entirely up to them. It would involve women incarcerated at the Southern Maine Women's Reentry Center. We have, somewhat easy access there. But our goal would be to also reach women who are in segregation or in the pods, which is like classification, and then the Women's Center, which would also include long-timers, people who might not ever be going home. And so that's a huge population as well. And what I want to know from these women is the answer to the questions that we're asking, right? What would you need to feel included in the community that you're going to return to? What would you like to see DOC do to help you maintain your parental relationships with your children, whether you're going home or not? And really, like, what led you here? We don't talk a whole lot about sex trafficking, but it's Maine's one of a national hub for sex trafficking. And there is an enormous amount of women who have gone through some horrific things, who could really use some support, especially when they are, trying to parent and deal with trauma. So there's so many openings for us to really serve each individual person. Our corrections, prison population in Maine for women doesn't really go over 140. I mean, there may be a time or two that it bumps up a little bit, but that's a small number of women in our population. We should have a peer support person for every single woman who's incarcerated. There's no reason we can't. We have the people to support them. So I want to go in, I want to ask these questions. I want to ask each and every one of them what they believe would help them, what led them to where they are, and how involved they wish to be in the change, if at all. Some of them won't, some of them will, but then there we go, as opening doors to opportunities for them as well. That research project right now is just, I've literally gotten, I have a whole plan. It's all put together. So, the last part is really just narrowing down some details, working with DOC on how to make it happen. And then obviously trying to decide, what the best funding source would be for a project like that. And if it fits into what we're doing now, or if it's, or whatever. But my goal is to really get and elevate those voices, and that needs to happen. That's where we need to start.
Thank you, Brenda.
Sounds like everyone except Jillian.
Yeah.
What happened?
There's some weird stuff happening. You can mute if you're not speaking. Okay. So one of the things that we know from this research and the work that the women did as part of this class is that mitigating the impacts of parental incarceration really requires a comprehensive approach. So there's no, one size fits all, do this program and that's it. And it really does involve, policies and strategies and programs at, pre-incarceration to just prevent incarceration and promote family. It involves programs and supports during incarceration. The key, I think it's you.
Right here?
Yeah.
Erica, I think you need to mute your microphone.
Okay, thank you. So one of the key things that a lot of the women speak to often is about the visits and the importance of being able to see their children while they're incarcerated, and promoting strategies and policies and programs that can really not only allow them to see them, but also just provide, make that a productive visit. So, a positive experience for the children and the women. and really all parents. We say women because we focus this work on women, but it's really about all parents. And then, of course, in reentry and, just reducing parental stress and increasing their confidence and supporting parents, when they come back to the community and, they come back to their families, and it's a really big transition. And I know Bree's going to speak more about that in a minute, so I won't get into it, but just supporting them in that transition so that they can, not only continue to, just improve the outcomes for themselves, but also for their families and support their families in that process and get back into, just the grind of being parents, which is hard for all of us. So, and so on that note, I'm going to actually pass it over to Ali and Bree to talk a little bit more about some of their ideas for change and, how we can continue to listen to more folks like themselves. So y'all can take it away.
Want to go first?
Yeah, I can. Just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Jillian said too about the importance of these collaborations. We really we need to come up with some ideas on how to support the children, right, in these situations. So as a mother, of course, and a formerly incarcerated woman, I want the support too, right? And I want them supported. However, I know from coming home and having conversations with my 6, almost 7-year-old daughter that there were moments in those visits that she needed support too, and understanding. And so I think that it's really important for us to think about when we think about parental incarceration, considering, yes, there will be some times where incarceration is the only option, but there are so many times where an alternative would have saved both the parent, the family, and the children from the heartache that incarceration can cause. And if we can stop it before that even happens, that would be the main goal. I'll tell you from my personal experience, my criminal conduct was from 2012 and 13. My arrest was in 2015. I remained on bail conditions after pretrial for almost 4 years before my conviction. And in that time, I enrolled in college. I worked full time. I got married. I settled down, and I got pregnant and had a baby. My son was 3 months old at my sentencing. And even though for 4 years I had no reoccurrent criminal conduct and had done everything perfect to a T, my sentence was still 8 years, all but 3, with 4 years of probation. It's unnecessary. Cost the state money. It cost my children their innocence. And if we can find alternatives, that's really a focus point for me, because that is important. What I'll also say is that supporting the children of incarcerated parents means public engagement as well. I know somebody in the comments mentioned public schools to help with the juvenile side of it. But really, we should start considering how to specifically support children in public schools who have a parent that are incarcerated, because what a lot of people don't realize is when that news comes out, your child now lives with a stigma. And so instead of getting additional services to support them, sometimes they actually end up getting the opposite. And it can be really hard, especially for a child who doesn't quite understand. So, community involvement has to be there. And one amazing way to do that is by giving these women the opportunity to work with the universities. When somebody meets me and I say, I work with the University of Southern Maine and I'm a student at UMA and I've done this and this and this, they listen to me. But if I had just gotten out and said, well, I just got out of prison, they'd be like, well, who are you? So it's really important. And the stigmatization around incarceration and the language that's used is also something that, directly affects everybody involved. So I think that really staying focused on how to encourage people coming home from prison to be part of their communities and to be accepted so they don't feel like the only option or the only safe place is to be incarcerated. So I will say just one last thing, Ali, and then I'll toss it to you. Currently, as you'll see, there's a little name up on the screen, Traveling Transformations. And I'm sure some of you are like, what does that mean? So as of right now, I am working on finding either a bus or a towable camper or a drivable camper. I mean, I'm cool with any of them. So if any of you have one in your backyard you want to get rid of, let me know. The plan is really it's a project me and my husband are going to do together. My husband's in long-term recovery and so am I. We're going to do this as like a project that will help us, and we're going to turn it into a traveling donation closet. Someday I'd love to serve men too. I've had a lot of questions about that. But right now my goal obviously is to serve my population. So these clothes come from donations. Everything is 100% free for people who qualify, which I mean, there's really not qualifications. If you're re-entering society, even if it's from a 24-hour stay in jail and you need an outfit, call me, I'm there. My goal is to work with the prisons and staff at the county jails, which I've had wonderful connections with through the Maine Prisoner Reentry Network, and just have people set up opportunities for these women as they're being released. They shouldn't have to do it on their own. You guys are, caseworkers and whatnot. And then, get them what they need. If they have children, we'll work on kids' clothes. If they're getting an apartment, let's find you some houseware. Like, I want to do whatever I possibly can to support women coming out of prison so that they can have a successful reentry into the community. And I especially want to lift up our Justice Scholar Strategy Network that will soon blossom, and really focus on women to stay on their path to higher education after reentry. It's hard to come out. It is absolutely terrifying to go to Walmart. And, women need things in order to, or not just women, but anybody. If you're in higher education and you're leaving and you don't know where you're going, you're not focused on your college education. And so we really need to look at the women who have put in the work for higher education and make sure that we are supporting them as they leave through the university, through peer mentors, through the community, and making sure that they have what they need to continue to be successful so that we can have educated neighbors and, people who want to give back to society because society helped them rather than feeling like they were beat by the system and resentful. We can change the whole outlook of people returning and, maybe even stop stigmatizing Department of Corrections too. We might even be able to change the way that the whole system works so that it can be a positive thing for those who cycle in and don't cycle, or cycle out, but don't cycle back in. So I'll pass it to you, Ellie. I know you have so much great information. I'm excited to hear what you're working on. And if you guys have any questions about my projects, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Bree. I don't think I can top what you just did right now, but I'll try my best. So with that being said, just to add on to what Bree has said, like the stigma specifically on people that are incarcerated, we have to understand that, this whole concept of incarceration has started and has been drained from cycles of systems that's been oppressing people and have been using people for their bodies and state money to get out of it. Like, that's really the point. especially in the late 80s and 90s when we seen the uprise in drug crimes, where Black folks were, a Black man was one in every 3 Black men would go to jail at least one time in their life, and one out of every 17 white men would go to jail, and that's due to the fact that the redlining and the distribution of drugs within the inner cities, and obviously the crack and the cocaine, the differences between the sentences on those points. And now we see the result of that. We see that 2.3 million people that are incarcerated to this day. We see that COVID was a push that we used to try to decarcerate people at a fast rate, and that was working. So the point is that we're seeing that people actually don't need to be incarcerated. We have about a quarter of the world's incarcerated population, with only 4% of the world's population. So which we're 20% over. And even if we released all the people that have nonviolent drug crimes, we would still have the most incarcerated population in the world. So this kind of shows you that now not only does incarceration increase not only does incarceration increase like the population, that there are people that are damaged, but what it does, it actually continues crime. It does not stop crime. We also see that 70 million people, which is almost a quarter, actually growing more than 70 million people, because it's happening on a daily, people in this country, which is a quarter of this country, have a criminal record. So I don't understand how a stigma could be possible when there's a system that's faulty. So what we do, in particular, like right now, what I started was a website. And actually, it's not this website. It was an event. It was a week-long event that taught people how to reverse the structure of racism, specifically in Maine. And I'm going to put the website right in here. Oh, it says message failed. Click to try again. Right, there we go. reversesrmain.org. It was a 5-day event where we had the experts from all different parts of science, a scientist, a cognitive scientist, someone that's a professor that with Black history, criminology, and policing. How K through 12 is affected by racism and all that. So how this whole institutions, this body of institutions are fixed on literally like degrading people's value in their lives, and how to really understand that and reverse that. That's the first thing that we've created through the University of Southern Maine. Another one is like where we're working on right now. It's a Black Power Table. University of Southern Maine right now is the most diverse university in the state of Maine, but at the same time, it has so many problems, and the system of white supremacy inside of institutions are so unfair. Because as I'm inside of these classes, I am noticing that these peers that I'm with are not children that are coming from inner communities, marginalized communities, LGBTQ. They're not. So it's like, okay, so people that are across the bridges, literally across the bridges from highways that have the green land are able to go to these colleges and universities, but youth that are in our communities don't have that option. They have the option to go to DHHS and the jail and whatnot. So that's the point. It's like, it's not only are these different institutions, it's like you can't even get into this institution if you wanted to. So that's when Opportunity Scholars really started. And great to Erica's point, when removing the box, like 50% of the people that checked off the box and didn't complete their application, 50% of them were Black. Like 50%. So the point is that in Maine, we are 1.6% Black. In the juvenile facility, we're 23% Black, right? So you see this whole system of these dynamics that are really affecting people of color. And I'm only talking about Black. I didn't add Asian or Hispanic or Native. I have not added. So it's an even bigger number when it comes to all people of color. So within that, right now we're trying to create this youth network to prove, like, we only have 24 kids that's locked up in the state. We need to prove that not only does it not work, there's a 44% recidivism rate when it comes to juveniles. So we need to create outside programs so we can have these kids have futures. These kids only know what they know. Everything that's been introduced to them is what they know. If they're drinking, that's what they're introduced to. If they're fighting, that's what they're introduced to. And usually anything that's happened to them, if they're abused, they're just going to respond in abuse. That's exactly what's going to happen. So if we need to give them the opportunity to do something better. First time I got incarcerated was age 14. I went to juvie at the age 15. So and then after I went back and forth because of being houseless and whatnot. I went in for 18 months of my life. Like, being inside of a confined space for 18 months when your brain is still developing, it's a really damaging thing. And I've seen it within my peers that how many of them have passed away, how many of them had got into bad relationships. Like it's just, or went back to prison. Like it's a small chance. And right now, there's not even many that I know that haven't been previously incarcerated. That's even in college right now. And that's the saddest part, to witness this and to notice this and watch people die, especially in my communities. And this is the result of what the system did. So I think, as an abolitionist, I believe in transformation. I don't believe in only trying to find alternatives within incarceration. I believe in solutions. We need to find the solutions. And how do we find these solutions is to provide the funding that we need into these programs that are going to not only transition the kids, but to get them to the success that they need. And we need to do it like ASAP. I don't even, this is a not only a public health issue, a racial justice issue, this is a humanity issue. So I think that's our number one thing when it comes to America, and the faults that we have caused throughout history. And the last thing is pathways for higher education. Why I say this is because the more you are educated, the more you can help others too. So you can impact people only by one individual impacting 100 people, and those 100 people impacting 100 people, every single a person, it can do a huge impact. So as we're on philanthropy, I really urge everyone to really try to invest into a lot of these programs that we have over here, especially Bree's programs, and anything we're doing through the University of Southern Maine. So thank you.
Ali, thank you for throwing that out there. And I just wanted really quickly to just throw some statistics out there when I'm talking about like the women incarcerated and why, Ali's the only guy on this panel right now. It's like the work that we started at the reentry center, right, obviously was focused around us. And what we found is that not only just white women, but white women in rural communities are like this population that people don't realize go to prison. Like it's like this big secret that these rural white women who live in cul-de-sacs and normal communities go to prison for crimes. And so, just some statistics, obviously there's an increase in incarceration for women over, the last 10 years, but looking at some of the numbers from the Sentencing Project, which I got to meet somebody from there, Nicole Porter. She's amazing, and I can't wait to work with her again. But white women, between 2000 to 2019, there was a 41% increase in incarceration for white women. And for African American women, there was a 60% increase. That's a huge increase on both sides of that number.
Yes.
And then that's an issue. Why are women going to prison? Why are more women going to prison? Let's get to the root of it. Let's get this research done so we can literally find that root problem, and with that root, grow a solution tree with all these pathways and branches and leaves. And Erica, please just give me some seeds. I just want to grow something.
Working on it. I want to just acknowledge our time boundary that I think some folks have to leave us for a hard stop at 2:15. But if anyone out there wants to stay on and talk, we can go long a little bit. You can technically go a little bit long. So we do have a little time for Q&A, and we'll just leave it there. If anyone in the chat wants to do that or come off mute, we would love to hear from you and just, honor our time boundary, but also be available for any comments or questions. And thank you to Morgan and to Aaron for inviting us into this opportunity and making this session possible. I really appreciate it. And we all do.
Before you stop sharing the screen, did we have one more question? I feel like we had one more powerful question, but maybe I'm misremembering.
Oh, we did. About what power you're willing to give up.
Yes.
I think that's what it is. It's a little bit about this conversation about equity. And as I listen to all of you, I hear us apologizing. Like, this is just about Black youth, and I didn't even think about Native yet. This is about white women, but I didn't think about this. This is about women, but we're thinking about the men. And I think it's both and, right? We have to develop more inclusive participatory strategies. That's what equity is. It's gender, it's racial, it's all of these things. But it also requires us that are in positions of power to let go of some to create equity. So just wanted to end with a little conversation, as Morgan lifted up, is what could you do in your work based on what you've heard here to develop more participatory and inclusive strategies, and what power can some of us let go of to create more equity?
I wish we had a way to interact directly with all the attendees, but hopefully people will put some stuff in the chat. While we're waiting for chats, I'm not sure how many funders have attended the session, but I'm a little late in saying this, but I just want to say that I feel like as a funder, it requires some flexibility to fund this kind of work. And I think it's just about being open to building the relationship as being the most important part of the work. And then from there, being flexible to how the work needs to shift and change. And also just being open to the new kinds of things that we need to fund to restructure power in our society. I mean, listening to Bree and Ali talk, hearing about the barriers that are in their way, that, philanthropy could do a lot to support eliminating those barriers for people at an individual level and at a systemic level. So I feel like there's real potential.
Sorry, Ali just scolded me that I'm typing again in the chat and hearing you. And I love everything that's being said in the chat as well. Thank you, Ali and Bree. I feel like so blessed that I get to work with you and every day and have you in my ear all the time. Thank you for sharing your light with people here today. It makes all the difference.
Thank you. It's an honor. It always is an honor and a pleasure.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron and Morgan, thanks for believing in the work we're doing.
Yeah, without you guys, it would be impossible. Well, nothing's quite impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for doing all the great work that you do.
Yep, we're very appreciative.
Thank you. And thanks for the nice feedback in the chat. Ooh, I hope we're formally evaluating this session. Because performance measures, right?
I believe there's surveys attached to every session.
Beautiful. And if anyone wants to keep in touch or talk more about this work, feel free to email us, to reach out, or to sign up for the newsletter. I also put a link there. We have a monthly newsletter that we send out in collaboration with Maine Center for Juvenile Policy and Law. So that's just one way to keep in touch if you want some more things in your inbox, little research nuggets and updates from what we're up to.
And I did also drop my email if people do have donations. I did see that there was a few people asking. So feel free to email me. And if need be, I can correlate a big drop spot and we'll do a big one-day pickup. I'm fine with that. I have a whole basement because we just bought a house.
This document is also attached to the session if anyone wants to look at it, and also with all of our contact information in it. So, all right, I think, should we?
Yeah, Ali, did you?
Like...
Ali, did you have one more thing, Ali? You look like you did.
Oh, I think I'm good. Y'all killed it. You know what I mean? I just asked a little bit of sugar in it. You know what I
mean? Okay. You have that lean forward look, like. Thank you all. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you. This was so great. We're going to stop the broadcast here in a moment, and just keep in mind that pretty much all of the sessions you'll be attending throughout the conference are going to be recorded. So if you have a colleague or someone in your network, just as a reminder, these are going to be available for future viewing as well. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for being engaged with the chat. I'll stay on for a couple moments if anyone has any questions about technology, but we also hope you'll join us at the keynote at 2:45. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Is the broadcast stopped?
I think it's all done. It doesn't say live.